people's garbage that's not appropriately looked after into the trees and munch on it in this little forested area. So I think I'm just making note of that. I think possibly there might be a role in the future on how we deal with the wild or green areas and wildlife areas. And I think we're going to have a session with the Director of Parks and Recreation, and maybe that's the time, because we have already, I think last council meeting, we identified, okay, well, there's some, de facto trails going through there, even though they're not official. And then what's the role of the wildlife corridor? I think that's all my comments for now. I might do a follow-up, Mayor Sulz, on the concern about the bank stability. So I just want to make sure we don't miss something. Yeah.
Okay. So my question to Mr. Simon, I'm sure that you're in receipt of said letter. Do you need a motion from council to look at that or add that to concerns on this property, or just the fact that the letter is sent to you, that will be duly noted? Any comment, please?
Through your worship, staff have been in direct contact with both the development proponent in this case as well as adjacent neighbors. And while, again, as Mr. Black said, it really is something that is up to the professional geotechnical engineer to make sure that the site is safe for the intended use. Staff have been trying to facilitate a conversation between those impacted parties to make sure that all issues are addressed. So with respect to a formal resolution, if it's something that council wants to do, it's definitely within their wheelhouse. But is it absolutely necessary? I would say no, because those conversations have already been occurring behind the scenes.
All right, thank you for that. Councillor Palmer.
I'll put a motion on the table that the letter expressing concerns about tree stability be forwarded to the applicant's geotech professionals for consideration.
All right, seconder for that motion. Councillor Brooks Hill. Any discussion on that? Councillor Elliott?
Just in general, for the project to go ahead, the geotech has to give a guarantee. It's schedules A and B, and it's included in that is a prescribed list of requirements that lead to scope stabilization or addressing any hazards that are there, or any that will unfold as the project goes forward. So I think this is just redundant. I mean, he's going to look at that anyway. So as Paul had mentioned, it's that we could put in place, but it's already being done. The geotech is going to put a stamp on it and guarantee or assure that the work's up to code, the slope is stable. So we've already made that a requirement. So we're going beyond that for the tree stability.
All right, Councillor Chalette.
Thank you, Your Worship. And further to that, I am kind of curious, because there's a letter later on the agenda as well about urban forests, where the comment that what I'd heard from Mr. Black was that trees are, the health of trees or the stability of trees, or whether the tree survives or not, is not necessarily tied to the geotech and whether the bank is stable. And I haven't seen this letter, nor have I talked with the neighbors. So, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Palmer, but it sounds like the concern is the health of the trees, not necessarily just the stability of the bank.
Through the chair. To Councillor Gillette, I think her concern was on potential liability of trees falling down. Okay. I think she sees the trees are going to fall, so I'm not.
Right.
And then further to Councillor Elliott, so I don't see this adding any layers, just a clarification. So we'll let the professionals do what the professionals.
I'm all about that. We've done it. It's a major expense, and but I think we're just beating a dead horse. It's already under wraps.
Okay,
Mr. Black.
Thank you, Your Worship. We can certainly make a record of this conversation and discuss this with the proponents and ask them, as part of their review, should the geotech determine that there is some hazard trees, or in his estimation that there's some slope stability issues that could impact the trees, that an arborist be further retained to consider hazard trees. Whether or not the applicant chooses to move forward with that would be another question, but we can certainly make that recommendation to them.
Great, thank you for that comment. All right, there is a motion on the table. Any further discussion on that motion? Seeing none, I'll call a question. Councillor Palmer, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, just for clarification, that's from the Director of Engineering, that's fine. So whatever they do with that, that's fine. But really the motion is just referring the concern to the geotech and let the professionals figure out what they need to do.
Great, thanks for clarification. All right, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. All right, any other business arising from those minutes? Seeing none, any business arising from the special council meeting minutes of March 1st?
Sorry, Gary, I think
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just, I think Councillor Palmer made a recommendation on the last council meeting about moving the OCP as the top priority. And I think earlier on in our council session, we had a discussion about the various concerns that we would like to see addressed. And at the time, it was OCP, zoning, all these different things that were laid out in front of us. But it was indicated that zoning was the top priority that needed to be addressed. So I don't know, and we've had a bit of a revision on the diction or semantics or vocabulary that's used in zoning, but we haven't reconfigured the zoning laws completely. And I'm wondering, are we taking you in a different direction than what we had previously?
Okay, so I'm just going to ask for clarification. Is this in the minutes or in the March, February 22nd minutes? Which one?
The whole, or sorry.
Yeah, so Mayor Sulz,
Yes, go ahead.
It is. It's item 11B2. And it was a motion that the official community plan update be the #1 priority for staff's work plan.
Okay, thank you for that. All right. So your question, Councillor Palmer, are we sending staff down a different direction than what we originally talked about? Is that your concern?
Yeah, that was it, Your Worship. I I think we had that discussion previously. We were on a rant or a mission to make the OCP move ahead, but then we got some feedback that the zoning bylaws were the biggest stumbling block, and now we're back onto the OCP. So I just want to make sure we're going in the right direction.
Okay. All right. Any comment, Mr. Simon or Mr. Black?
Through your worship, Councillor Elliott. So there were some changes, you are correct, to the zoning bylaw. Some of those were quite substantial. It was a major cleanup through zoning bylaw repeal and replace 2299. So that really did address a lot of the immediate concerns that we had. Moving forward, it's critically important that we get the OCP in place as that high-level document to guide the further work in the zoning bylaw, so that we have future amendments that we'll be proposing to council that are aligned with our OCP. And I think as council sees the OCP progressing through the process and when it's ultimately brought before you, you'll be happy to see how many items are in there related to amendments to the zoning bylaw to support some of the goals that have been identified by the community as part of the consultation process for the OCP.
Fair enough. Thank you.
All right, good. Okay, that answers your question. Moving on, any business? So go ahead, Councillor Palmer.
Just a note for staff, just on the YouTube, I don't see it streaming there, just for staff to consider. So people might, our meeting isn't being streamed right now, it appears.
It appears live on my computer. So
okay.
Just clarification, Jay, we're live. Jaylene, we're good?
Okay.
Yes, we should be live there.
All right, thank you. Appreciate that. All right. Any other business arising from the minutes? Okay, not seeing any hands, so I am going to move on to item 5A, OCP Amendment Bylaw 2311 and Zoning Amendment Bylaw 2312. The report, do you want to comment on the report before we put the motion on the table, Mr. Simon? How do you feel?
Through your worship, nothing in addition. We do have a presentation, should council wish to see that.
Okay, council, do you wish to see the presentation? Councillor Palmer, Councillor Elliott, you may want to make comment.
Yeah, I think we should do the presentation. If there's, this is for the public information that's leading to the public hearing.
Right. All right. Thank you. So, Mr. Simon, if you could do that presentation, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just want to make sure everyone can see the screen here. So the application that's before us today is official community plan amendment and rezoning application for the site at 420 Downey Street. So the application is to rezone the subject lands to a comprehensive development zone and to amend the land use designation of the official community plan from neighborhood mixed use to neighborhood mixed, to mixed use urban center. So we'll start off with a recommendation from staff, a little bit of details on the background of the proposal, and follow with the discussion. So staff are just simply recommending that the report be received for information today. Looking at some of the background of the site's owned by BC Housing. They acquired the old Mount Begbie school site in February 2019. It's located within the South Side neighborhood at 4th Street in Downey. Between February 2020 and September 2020, BC Housing led 3 community engagement events to ultimately refine a development concept that has helped influence the comprehensive development zone and OCP amendment application that is the subject of the public hearing today. So Council granted first and second reading on February 8th, 2022, and then now today on March 8th, we are having the legislatively required public hearing for the application. So getting into some details on the proposal. So looking at the housing typology that's proposed for the site, there's 3 4-story apartment buildings, each with row house dwelling units located facing the street, so that there's going to be a stepping back approach to have more continuity with the existing development context, which is predominantly single family within the neighborhood. Row house development is proposed in front of all 3 buildings. There's approximately 174 dwelling units with a mix of bachelor suites up to 3 bedrooms, including 16 2-story row house units. Units will be owned by BC Housing, rented targeting middle moderate income families, seniors, and youth. Commercial is proposed within buildings 1 and 3. The intent is to accommodate uses such as daycares, convenience stores, restaurant, retail, personal service establishments, things that are intended to make this more of a commercial node within the Southside community, adding on to the existing Southside market, which is across Edward Street. Getting into some preliminary details on building and site design, and do keep in mind that these will be further refined at development permit stage. About 182 parking stalls on site, which is an average of 1 per unit and 8 stalls for commercial. This will be both surface parking as well as below ground parking. The conceptual renderings have been submitted, and you can see a couple images here. Again, this will be further refined with the development permit application when they get into detailed design. The design principle will focus on access and circulation, reinforcing the pedestrian character of the project. Row houses will each have their own private access path. Extensive landscaping is proposed around the perimeter of the site. Options for community amenity space, such as community garden, dog run, or other uses are being explored right now as well. When we look at the previous consultation events that have happened for this proposal, there was 3 community engagement events posting onto the BC Housing Let's Talk housing webpage. BC Housing has had conversations with various stakeholders in the community, including the Revelstoke Community Housing Society. They've been working with Indigenous bands that have had an interest in the project, and staff went with them and completed a walk of the site with the Adams Lake Band. Internal external agency has occurred to ensure that any impacts with respect to utilities, anything else from external agencies has been addressed as part of the proposal. And the proposal was presented to the Advisory Planning Commission, who did pass a resolution in support of the project. Staff have completed an evaluation of the proposal against the provisions of the official community plan, and staff are supportive of the proposal. Provides for infill of an existing undeveloped parcel, high quality mixed use residential form, allows for the increased density and contributes to the quantity of rental housing in the city. The proposed density, size, shape, and character of the development complements the aesthetics, qualities, character, and image established uses of the surrounding neighborhood. It's not planned to be gated, which is something that is not supported within the OCP. Community spaces are going to be provided for. The building is going to facilitate design that promotes CEPTED principles, which is crime prevention through environmental design. So having usable open space such as open balconies to really promote that eyes on the street, so that this really is integrated as part of the community. The larger massing of apartment buildings when compared with the surrounding single-family residential community will be offset by the transitions of the row houses located in front of the dwellings to reduce that overall massing so that we don't just have 3 big apartment building blocks adjacent to a main roadway. The use of underground parking in response to comments from the community is aligned with both age-friendly principles to eliminate the need for shoveling. Variety of housing forms are proposed in the mixed-use buildings to encourage affordability, diversification of the city's housing stock. As everyone has seen, that's been significantly exacerbated over the last few years within the city, having a major housing crunch for the rental market. It's impacting a lot of businesses within the community, so this is definitely much needed rental accommodation. So again, that concludes staff's evaluation and kind of indicating why we are supportive of the proposal. And again, the staff recommendation is that the report be received for information. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simon. Appreciate that. Can someone put a motion on the table here for me to receive the report? Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, I'll put the motion that the report be received for information only.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Elliott. Any further discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion's carried. We're going to start the public hearing in a moment. I'm just going to run for my speakers list. Hang on a second. Okay, I'm going to read the opening statement for the public hearing. I'd like to call to order this public hearing. It's being convened pursuant to Section 464 of the Local Government Act. At this public hearing, the public will be allowed to make representations to council, and all persons present who believe their interests are affected by the proposed bylaw shall be given the opportunity to address council. By participating in this public hearing, you're consenting to appearing on video and/or having audio of your comments recorded, which includes the disclosure of your name and street address. Information that you provide at this meeting is being collected for the purpose of informing council of your interest in property which may be affected by the proposed bylaw, and this information will become a permanent public record. Given this, public hearing participants shall be careful not to share personal information about themselves or others that could put themselves or others at risk of harm. Finally, should any person not wish to consent to appearing on video or having audio of their comments recorded, you are free to remove yourself from this meeting now. Those of you who wish to speak concerning this proposed bylaw should commence your address to council by clearly stating your name and address. Then you may give us the benefit of your views concerning the proposed bylaw. Please observe the rules, and if you have any concerns with the manner in which the hearing is concluded, direct your comments to myself, the chair. Members of council may, if they wish, ask questions of you following your presentation. However, the main function of council members today is to listen to the views of the public. It is not the function of council at this public hearing to debate the merits of the proposed bylaw with individual citizens. Everyone shall be given reasonable opportunity to be heard at this meeting. No one will be or should feel discouraged or prevented from making his or her views heard. In considering the proposed bylaw, council has received documents which may influence its decision. These documents are available for review in a binder located in the Development Services Department, or alternatively forming part of the agenda package for today's meeting and accessed under Find Council Documents. Before we begin, may I have the corporate officer confirm that all due process was followed according to the Local Government Act?
Yes, Your Worship, all due process was followed.
Thank you, Ms. Floyd. A pre-registered speaker list has been established. Each speaker's initial presentation will be limited to 3 minutes, provided the comments are relevant to the issues at hand and the hearing is not being obstructed. This initial time limit is to allow everyone a fair opportunity to address council respecting the proposed bylaw amendment. After everyone on the speakers list has spoken once, speakers will be allowed a supplementary 2-minute presentation, which will be limited to new comments only. An opportunity to provide a supplementary presentation is not intended to allow presenters to repeat information from a speaker's initial presentation. Should you wish to provide council with new comments, raise your hand and I will call upon you, each of you, until all participants have had a chance to speak. After everyone on the speakers list has had the opportunity to speak twice, speakers will be allowed a third 2-minute presentation, which again will be limited to new comments only. Should you wish to provide council with new comments, raise your hand and I will call upon you until all participants have had a chance to speak. So I'm just going to go to my speakers list now. Mr. Morrison, first on my speakers list is Chris Salvik. Is Chris on the phone with you?
Your worship, he is. We're just having an issue with our timer. So we'll be keeping track of time manually today.
All right, thank you. Mr. Salvik, if you would give us your full name and your civic address, please.
Thank you, Worship and Council, for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Chris Salvik. I am the owner of 413 Edward Street, which backs onto the subject property. Great.
Carry on, Mr. Salvik.
So I have owned the property since 2010, have been renting it out since 2017, and currently have no plans to sell the property in the future. While I am mostly supportive of the proposed development, in my limited time to speak, I would like to highlight my key comments and concerns from the letter I submitted for the public hearing. I'm actually going to jump ahead because just because of the 3-minute limit. I'll start with number 4. Between Edward Street and Downey Street from the subject property all the way to Oscar Street, there are mostly long, large lots that in the long term are the perfect opportunity for higher density infill residential development to help Revelstoke provide more diverse and affordable housing options while minimizing any further wasteful expansion into the city's rural natural areas. To allow for a more pedestrian-oriented village-like streetscape along Edward and Downey while maximizing higher density design potential and utility servicing, the city should consider incorporating a 6-meter public lane starting from the subject property and eventually connecting close to Oscar Street as future infill development occurs. Ideally, a lane can be incorporated along the rear of the property from Edward Street through Downey Street. A simple alternative would be to convert the proposed Downey Street access to the subject development into the public lane, which would be extended to the very back of 413 Edward Street and then extended northeast towards Oscar Street as future development occurs. At minimum, I would like to see an easement considered along Downey Street access for future development at 400 Downey, 404 Downey, 413 Edward Street, and 407 Edward Street. And in this case, an easement should also be provided for future development of 419 Edward Street from the Edward Street access to the site. In the long term, providing improved access for future development between Downey and Edward would contribute to further additional affordable housing and improved pedestrian-oriented development. I'm going to jump to how much time do I have left? Come on.
We are 45 seconds.
45 seconds. Okay. I'll jump to short one. For number 1 of my comments, I would like the allowance of the 2.2 meter retaining wall along Edward Street be removed as noted in the proposed zoning amendment bylaw 2312. Ideally, the development will slope with existing street grade and the commercial unit on the corner of 4th Street as currently proposed will be at grade to improve the public interface and improve the viability of future businesses located here. Now, prior to 4th and final reading of the rezoning and OCP amendments is ultimately the time for council to request such changes. While I understand the importance of getting a more affordable housing as soon as possible, given the prominent location and high density of the proposed development, I think the above noted or my noted comments are key to maximizing the positive long-term impacts of this development for the future residents of the subject development, the Southside neighborhood, and Revelstoke. Thank you for your time and consideration. I'll come back with my other 2 comments on the next round. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Salvik.
So Sulz, I have a question.
Go ahead, Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Chris, for your information. You said this, the materials in a letter, so is it basically verbatim in the letter that you've submitted?
It's changed slightly. I've kind of simplified it, and I've taken out some of the requests that could potentially be handled at the development permit stage.
Right, and when did you submit the letter?
This morning.
Okay, yeah, so I haven't had an opportunity to look at it, but we'll be considering it. It's just, it's interesting information you have there, so I just want to make sure that you have an opportunity for all that. But if it's written, that's going to be really good, but we'll hear the rest of what you have to say in later on here.
And some of the comments I previously sent forward to the applicant and the city back in July 2020, but I don't think ever, from what I recall, it was just taken under consideration at that time.
Okay.
Great, thank you. All right, any other questions from council? Seeing none, our second speaker, Cheryl Peters from BC Housing. Cheryl, could you state your name and where you're calling from, please?
Sure. I just want to make sure that my speaker's working. Is everybody hearing me okay?
We are.
Thank you, Chair. Cheryl Peters, Provincial Director, Redevelopment, BC Housing. I represent PRHC and BC Housing, the owners of the site. I think you guys have seen me before, Council and Mayor. Just here to say thank you for the opportunity. Again, once again, just trying to make sure that you guys know that we're accessible and available for questions, and looking forward to commentary from the speakers and delegates today. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you for the opportunity, Chair.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Peters. Moving on, Joanna Tung, BC Housing.
Yes, similar to Cheryl, I am with the BC Housing as an applicant. Again, here to respond to any questions that might come up. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. And moving on, Alec Warrender, BC Housing Consultant. Any comments, Alec? Alec, are you there?
Sorry, I was muted there, but yes, I'm here again, just with Joanna and Cheryl, lead consultant here, so available to answer questions as needed. Thank you.
So, Mr. Salvik, I see you have your hand up. I would like to go through the speakers list before I get you to ask a question. Larry Peters, are you present and want to make comments?
Your worship, I do not have Larry Peters online.
Okay. Rosie Denton.
And I do not have Rosie Denton online.
Great, thank you, Mr. Morrison. Chris Salvik, we're going to come back to you.
All right, thank you, Your Worship. So I'll just go over the next 2 points that I didn't get to previously there. So first off, as the number of required parking spaces have been reduced, as per the city standards, the minimum number of long-term bicycle parking spaces or bike stalls per dwelling unit as per section 11A 22.7 of the zoning amendment bylaw 2312. It's my opinion that bike parking should be increased from the proposed 0.15 bike stalls per dwelling. To me, this seems abnormally low, and I would suggest increasing it to what I'm suggesting is 1.25 bike stalls per dwelling unit. And I would also suggest an additional 6 short-term bicycle parking spaces at each of the main apartment entrances, if possible. My final point is the proposed fenced dog run is directly adjacent to my property and my neighbor's property to the south. We have 2 dogs in our family, which means I personally know how loud these off-leash dog areas can get. And my concern is that the off-leash dog area will actually have more significant noise impact than the proposed development in general. It does not seem reasonable to locate the dog runs as proposed, and I ask that its proposed location be removed from the zoning amendment bylaw number 2312, and that the dog run be removed or relocated elsewhere on the site. When eventually 413 and 419 Edward Street are developed with higher densities, the impacts may prove to be significant at the currently proposed location. And those are all my comments, other than I have a few more comments in my letter that I sent in, but those can potentially be addressed at the development permit stage. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Salvik. All right, I've gone through the speakers list. We have some of BC Housing proponents here. I'm going to ask Mr. Morrison, do we have anyone in the public that's there that wishes to speak?
We have nobody else online.
All right, thank you, Mr. Morrison. Going back, Ms. Peters, any further comment from BC Housing?
Not at this time.
Okay. Ms. Tung, any comments?
Nothing from me, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Warnder, any comments?
No, I'm good, thanks.
All right. So, Mr. Salvik, I'm going to come back to you for your third time to speak. If you have comments you'd like to make.
No further comments, Your Worship.
All right. So not seeing any other speakers on list or any other comments. Any questions from council for anyone before I ask for a motion to close this public hearing? Councillor Charlotte.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just checking in on the public comments received. Mr. Salvik had referred to a letter to the public hearing, but I'm not seeing it in my version of the attachments.
It's in mine.
I was wondering about that because I was thinking I've deleted it 3 times and it's still not showing it, but I just wanted to make sure that wasn't just online. So you see it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I did earlier this afternoon.
If other councillors can see that letter as part of the agenda package, I will figure mine out and be comforted. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments from council? Councillor Elliott?
Yes, Your Worship. Maybe for Ms. Peterson, is the commitment to, or the urgency from BC Housing to move on this in jeopardy with the next budget or the next political party, or is it pretty secure? Can we count on this to be underway in the next year or so?
I can't, sorry, through Your Worship, I can address that we have not secured it as part of our budget ask as of yet. Our job here on this particular project is a little different than what you guys may be used to, where we have a program and we're administering secured funds through that program through a project call. This one's a little bit different, where we determine magnitude first, and then we go to Treasury Board, much like you might see with other capital projects like a hospital or some other provincially provided asset. So this one's a little bit different.
So do you think with a change in government or, a reconsideration with budget, we're in jeopardy of not getting this underway?
If you're asking my opinion, I don't know if I could project a political slate at this point, but we're trying to bring a balanced approach to the cost to the taxpayer on affording and providing housing opportunities to Revelstoke. So we feel that we provided a good business case that could be accepted by any entity that's in power.
Okay. And may I ask one more?
Yes, go ahead, please.
The senior citizen or senior living quarters, how have you got a proportion of what might be in store on this project? I mean, there's 174 units. Do you have a percentage that might go to people as they age or want to downsize their homes?
Through the chair, I'd like to respond to that. Right now, we're assuming that any seniors that would be occupying the space would be completely independent. We don't have any provisions at the moment which would require interagency partnerships with the likes of Interior Health to provide any other kinds of, I'll call it almost semi-supportive housing, like assisted living or that kind of housing for along the seniors housing continuum. But to say how many units are specifically garnered for seniors, we'd like to leave that open at the moment, waiting for what our partnership structure would be. We would, of course, own the property, but we'd be looking for an operator partner to assist. And of course, that operator may or may not have some specialties with servicing senior clientele.
Councillor Elliott, follow up.
Yeah, I think in our housing study, certainly a missing element in our housing stock is this downsized seniors, something that might be appropriate for people as they age and independent or, yeah, that's mostly what I'm considering, but there's no specific, like it's not 55 plus or 65 plus that does, so get consideration. And maybe that's what we need. We need some of that in our housing stock. So anyway, it's just for consideration.
Okay. Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. I'm also not receiving the letters that have been received today either. So if we could just have the corporate officer confirm that we'll have them. I deleted my agenda, refreshed it, and gone back in. So just want to make sure we've got that.
I just double checked. I can still see them.
You can still see them.
What kind of privilege do you get?
I just don't want a hiccup where we don't have them.
Yeah.
It exists.
It exists. So including the one there was more than just Chris's that.
Yeah, there was quite a few.
Okay.
I don't know the exact number, but.
And through the chair, Mayor Sulz, just confirm that she has them.
Yes, yes, Councillor Palmer, we do have them. I will ensure that your agendas are updated and accessible.
Okay, thanks.
I've received them and got them all. So if I cut out, I definitely have some unstable internet for some reason. But so I'm just going to go back to calling for another time. For the first time, is there anyone who wishes to make any further representations? Seeing none. For the second time, is there anyone who wishes to make any further representations? For the third time, is there anyone who wishes to make any further representations? There being no further speakers, I declare this public hearing closed. Thank you very much for your submissions. Please note that no further comments, either written or verbal, can be received once this meeting has been closed. I will now call for a motion to close the public hearing. So someone want to make that motion on council, please? Councillor Brooks Hill, seconded by Councillor Charlotte. All those in favor? Motion's carried. This public hearing is closed. Thank you. We are going to move on now to item 5B, Development Variance Permit DVP 2021-0015. Mr. Simon, do you have a presentation that you would like to do?
Through your worship, this is actually Ms. Hartling's file, but I don't believe she has a formal presentation. But if council does have questions, she does have some images available if you guys want to speak to that.
All right. So can I have someone on council put the first motion on the table, please?
I'll put the motion on, Mayor Sulz, as written.
Okay. All right. Seconder for that motion, please. I'm not seeing any hand up, so can you just verbally say you would like to second the motion?
Councillor Brooks Hill.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Brooks Hill. So I will now ask, is there any questions for Ms. Hartling regarding the motion?
So through the chair.
Go ahead.
Just if we could just have clarification on the reduction of off-street loading and the implications of that. I don't have a problem with it, but I just, if there's any comments from Ms. Hartley.
Ms. Hartley?
Through your worship, no new comments from what's in the staff report. We have done variances for off-street loading in the downtown core area for businesses, for retail, restaurants, hotels, from the requirement of 1 off-street loading space to 0 as there is lane access that's plowed. If there's not lane access that's plowed that would service the building, then there would be more of a concern not to put it onto the main streets, but as they do have lane access behind the building and in between the building and City Hall, staff do not have any concerns with this reduction in the downtown core.
Paralysis.
We lost our chair.
No. Who's acting mayor?
Through your worship, did anyone hear me? My screen froze.
Oh, back now. Nope, we lost you.
We can hear you, Eric.
I'm back now. I don't know what the heck's going on, but anyway, thanks for your patience. So did your question get answered, Councillor?
Yes, thank you very much, Ms. Hartley.
All right, any other further questions? We're actually asking for an increase in the minimum building height for what, 3 feet, I believe, Ms. Hartley, is that correct?
Sorry, through your worship, yes.
12
sorry,
meters to 13 meters, yeah. Okay.
Yes, that's correct, your worship. And that's mainly due to the added aesthetic features on the top of the building for the gable roof, and then the parapets at the top for the more historic looking features. Majority of the building is 13 or 12 meters and under.
All right, thank you for that. Any further questions on the motion on the table? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? I don't see anyone opposed. Is that correct? Okay, motion's carried. Thank you. Moving on to item number 2. Someone want to put that on the table, please?
I'll put the motion on the table as written.
Okay, seconder for that motion, Councillor Brooks Hill. Any discussion on that motion or questions for Ms. Hartling regarding form and character of the hotel? Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. I'm just going to make a couple general comments, somewhat related to the previous motion as well, but more appropriate on this. I'll just make a comment that, from my perspective, I'm disappointed that that we didn't get the opportunity for more mixed use, basically commercial on the lower level and higher density, and more amenity areas in that. Having said that, I think this is this project is a good project. I would have liked to have seen it better, bigger, and better, but we have what we have today, and I think Base Camp is has demonstrated they're a very good developer, have had good products in Canmore and in here in Revelstoke as well. I do have a question regarding economic development. And I'm thinking in terms of in the future when there's places that there's potential economic opportunity. Has that gone through the economic development department as well, or is it just purely a planning department exercise?
Ms. Hartley.
Through your worship, for this subject application, this is referred to all city departments. It's just a general referral with what the applicant is proposing. For some applications that come in, economic development may be more impacted and provide more comments. However, with this subject application, no comments were received.
Yeah, Ms. Braun, any comment?
None to add, your worship.
All right, thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Palmer?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Any other comments on the motion on the table? I too will echo what Councillor Palmer has stated. A little disappointed that we're not seeing some retail on the main level, especially in the downtown core. However, it is what it is, and it's before us now. So glad to see something coming forward. Any other questions or concerns on motion on the table? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Someone put item number 3 on, please. Councillor Palmer?
Yeah, the motion on the table as written.
Okay, is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Brooks Hill. Discussion on the motion. Any comments for Ms. Hartling or comments for the public? Councillor Palmer?
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. Much on the same theme. I would have certainly liked to have seen more canopy, but the need for that is diminished without the more commercial activity on that street. It's primarily what's being permitted here is for the benefit of the hotel. And I think that's my main point on that. So I certainly would have been receptive to more canopy, but that would have probably just increased their costs quite a bit. That's my comments.
All right. Thank you. All right. Any other comments from councillors? Seeing none. Councillor Brooks Hill, I see you leaning forward. Are you going to ask a question? I'm sorry, I can't see hands from that far back.
Nope, no.
Okay. All right. Good enough. I will call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Hartling. Thank you, council. All right, we're going to move on to item 6, announcements from the mayor. Just briefly, this weekend we saw a group of residents get together for a rally in support of our Ukrainian families in the community and to stand with Ukraine. I was able to take in that rally and quite supportive of what those people are doing. It's nice to see that we have a group that are concerned about our community members who've just come from the Ukraine and concerned about the people in the Ukraine. So I'm very pleased with how that's going, and there are ways to support all of those people. And so if you want to ask anyone in the Ukrainian community that you know in the community, or look online for ways to assist, by all means, there are ways to assist. Thank you. Going to move on to item 9A, fees and charges amendment bylaw. Someone want to put that motion on the table, please? Councillor Brooks Hill.
The fees and charges amendment bylaw number 2303 be read a third time.
Seconder for that motion, please. Councillor Charlotte. Any discussion on the motion? Any comments, Ms. McCabe?
None, your worship. Thank you.
All right. Seeing no comments, I will call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Moving on to item B. Someone make that motion? Councillor Brooks Hill.
That fees and charges amendment bylaw number 2319 be adopted.
Seconder for the motion, Councillor Charlotte. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Moving on to item C, zoning amendment bylaw. Someone want to make that motion? Councillor Elliott. Did you have your hand up?
That zoning amendment bylaw number 2320 be read a first and second time.
Seconder for that motion, Councillor Charlotte. Discussion on the motion.
Can we just do that?
Any comments or questions? This is a zoning amendment, so we're on to that. Any comments or questions for Mr. Simon? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All those in, somebody had a question? Okay, Councillor Charlotte.
Let me find this here. This was for the CD8 zone, correct?
Yes.
And there was a list of all the properties that it was referring to. And I was curious if staff could explain a little bit more about the rationale behind employee parking requirements. One question, as I was talking with various colleagues, was that while staff, at least the way that I was reading the report, the way staff get to work when they live in town, they might very well not drive to work and use a staff shuttle, but that does not mean they don't have a vehicle back at home. My concern is without strong transit, intracity transit out of our community, there's a lot of reasons why people would still have a vehicle in our community at this stage. But I was hoping to get some comments back from staff to clarify that a little.
Mr. Simon.
Through your worship, the reductions that are requested here with respect to parking requirements for employee housing are somewhat reflective of what you would see for hostel requirements within our existing zoning bylaw. So when we're talking employee housing, which is in effect a form of affordable housing within the city, the question of parking is always going to be something that comes up. It is a challenge because it's always a balancing act. The more parking you require, the less affordable the housing becomes. The proponent in this case is quite adamant that there's not a need to have excessive parking requirements as what the current zoning bylaw would require, which is 1.5 per dwelling unit. And one thing too to clarify, and this is where we start getting into the interesting nuance of how the province regulates development at the resort and how we regulate it, is it's 0.15 stalls per bed unit, not per dwelling unit. So what this equates to is about 0.33 stalls per dwelling unit. So it is a little bit more. So 0.15 is a little bit misleading because that would be per bed, per pillow, which is how the province regulates it based on their master development agreement. Whereas the city, we usually go per dwelling unit, but we're trying to have that more, I guess, continuity between the requirements under the MDA and the requirements in the zoning bylaw. With this proposal, there is, and you'll see it coming to you quite shortly, more detailed design about transit accommodation on site with the employee housing project in the day use parking area, as well as pathway connectivity, so that there is a little bit more connectivity between the site to further justify the reduction in parking.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or concerns, Councillor Brookshill?
Just a comment. It's mentioned in the report, you know, and I don't want to give the impression that we're giving favorable treatment to the resort. I know that parking is an issue downtown that has been quite controversial, but in this case, essentially, if there's a problem, it becomes their problem. It's not, there isn't another business that right there that's going to be impacted. It's going to be their employees who are parking somewhere that's inconveniencing them, and it will likely be dealt with by them. So that really tips me over into being in favor of this.
All right. Thank you for that comment. Any other comments from council? Seeing none, I will then ask the question. All those in favor of being read first and second time? Motion's carried. No one opposed. Item number C2. Someone want to put that motion on the table, please? Councillor Charlotte.
That a public hearing for bylaw number 2320 be waived in accordance with section 464.2 of the Local Government Act, and that notice be issued to waive the public hearing as per section 476 of the Local Government Act.
Seconder for the motion, please. Councillor Elliott. Thank you. Any discussion on this motion or questions for Mr. Simon? Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. I'll be opposed to this motion. We had a public hearing today. We had a public hearing last week. They're sometimes tedious, painful, but I see no reason that we should not give the public opportunity to speak on this. It's an important component, and we by waiving the public hearing, there might be something, probably nothing, but there might be something that we don't hear as a result of this. So I'll be opposed to the motion.
Great. Councillor Brookshill.
I agree with Councillor Palmer. As much as it might be a nuisance, we might not get anyone commenting. I think it's worthwhile holding a public hearing.
Okay. Any comments from other councillors?
How quickly can we add to the meeting agenda?
It says here, as an alternate, a public hearing be scheduled for April 12th.
April 12th? Does it impede progress? Is this just, I mean, I'm not going to do anything until April 12th anyway, but Paul, are we blocking anything or are we installing anything if we have a public hearing at that time?
Mr. Simon, comment?
Through your worship, we've been working very closely with the resort, and we just recently received their building permit application for phase 1 of the employee housing, trying to overlap as much process as we can, not to negate the deliberation. The applicant is very aware of the risk should there be changes made at the council table that would impact their development proposal. But given the significance, and this amendment does directly relate to employee housing, given the significance of getting their employee housing project in the ground, we are targeting to try and have this wrapped up by April. So if a public hearing is held in April, then we'd likely be looking at May council date for adoption, notwithstanding any potential changes that would be directed as a result of council deliberation.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Palmer, comment.
Question to staff. If there was a public hearing at the April 12th meeting, is there any reason that the third reading couldn't occur immediately after that, notwithstanding any concerns that are actually raised? And could the adoption be done at that meeting as well, or done 24 hours or 48 hours later?
Through your worship, third reading could be granted on the 12th meeting after the closure of the public hearing, and I would need to defer to the corporate officer with respect to whether or not adoption could also occur on that same day.
Ms. Floyd.
Through your worship, I believe we need 24 clear hours between third reading and adoption for the zoning amendment.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Any other comment from council?
Provincial.
Go ahead.
We have a committee of the whole meeting 2 days later, so we could have a special council meeting 15 minutes before.
Yeah.
Okay, in light of that, so Councillor Palmer, you had your hand up.
Yeah, so I'm probably just going to say the same thing you were, Mayor Sulz. We can vote on it. If it fails, I'll put a motion on the table to have the public hearing scheduled for April 12th. And if this fails, if it passes, then we move on.
Great, thank you. All right, so before I call a question, I'll just make comment. We have spoken and gave approval for public hearings to be waived in situations like this, even though I understand what Councillor Palmer is asking here as far as getting input from the public, but because this is on the resort lands and will be affecting the resort, I'm supportive of this motion going forward, and then being able to move things forward for the building permits and whatnot as they go forward. So I will ask, is there any other comments? Councillor Charlotte, you have your hand up.
Just to also voice my support for waiving the public hearing, as much as I can appreciate the desire to make our process as transparent and open as possible. As far as I'm aware, with the notice to waive public hearing, the public will still be able to submit comment before the third reading. Is that correct?
Ms. Floyd, comment on there, and I see you have your hand up.
Yes, sorry. So my hand up was up because referring to the provincial website, zoning bylaws can be adopted at the same meeting as third reading. So I just wanted to clarify that.
All right, thank you.
So we could approve on the 12th. We have a public hearing and could hear what's said and then make an approval or against it at that time.
James?
Thanks, Mike. I just wanted to clarify to the corporate officer, I believe it's 2/3 vote is required to do that, to adopt after third reading.
Clarity on that, Ms. Floyd?
Yes, Councillor Palmer, you're correct.
I think that was Mr. Thackeray.
Oh,
we
I can't see you over there, James.
That's great.
Well, 2/3 is required to pass anything with 6 of us, so.
Yeah, that's 4 out of 6. All right, any further discussion on the motion on the table? Seeing none, I will call a question. All those in favor of this motion, please raise your hand. You see Councillor Sherlatt, Councillor Rind, Councillor Elliott, and Mayor Sulz. Those opposed? Councillor Palmer, Councillor Brooks Hill, this motion has been passed and adopted. Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to 11A, staff reports. Someone want to put this motion on the table? Councillor Brooks Hill.
That funding for $10,000 per annum for the role of food security coordinator be approved.
Is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Sherlatt. Any comments or questions on the motion? Councillor Sherlatt.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to say that I'm really impressed with the work that the food security coordinator has been able to do in her role. Looking at the reassessment of the food security strategy for 2022, 7 years after the 2014 strategy, there has been a lot accomplished in this community. And I think that the pandemic has really highlighted the need for this. So I am fully in support of this funding being continuing. Thank you.
Any other comments from council? Councillor Brooks Hill.
I'm fully in support of this. I just wonder if we're doing $10,000 per annum, shouldn't there be a cost of living in that?
Any comments, Ms. Braun?
Only to add, and I would hardly agree with through your worship with Councillor Brooks Hill, but we weren't looking for an increase given the budget discussions that are underway right now. Having said that, I am intending to go to the CSRD and request that a matching $10,000 be provided through EOF funds to match what the city is putting into this role, because more and more we're seeing from the projects that we are developing, including this funding request. We're working more closely with food producers in Region B, so we are hoping to double the amount for the food security coordinator by a matching EOF fund.
All right, thank you for that comment. Is that any follow-up on that, Councillor Brooks Hill, before I go to Councillor Palmer? None? Okay, Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. To Ingrid, so the whole strategy, including this 10,000, was presented in December 2020. Am I understanding your report correctly there?
Yes, I believe that's the link will take you to that presentation that Melissa Hemphill did with her role. And
Right.
then since then, we've had a number of different issues related to this file. We've allocated EOF funds to updating the food security strategy from 2014. We've submitted an application to the EOF fund as well for $50,000 for the incubator kitchen, which was approved. And now we've got an application going into UBCM looking for $100,000 in funding, which would be more of a regional project. If we would limited it to the city, we would be limited to $50,000, but we're asking for $100,000 in partnership with the CSRD, and this is going to their board meeting next week to work with the local food producers in Region B. So there's lots of activity happening in this area, but the core $10,000 we're talking about is to basically just support the role of food security coordinator as contracted through Community Connections.
And then further to that, and so because I wasn't here at the table back then, but this was kind of laid out before council and had an endorsement essentially at that time, and so this is part of the ongoing thing.
Right, that's correct.
Your Worship, that's correct.
Any other comments, Councillor Elliott?
So this is, we've gone through a 3-year period for the food coordinator role, and now we're going to an annual contribution. Is that the hope or the idea behind this?
Ms. Brown.
So, Your Worship, that's correct. I believe it's in the budget. Director McCabe can probably speak to that as an ongoing $10,000 commitment. I don't think we've limited it, Tanya, to 3 years.
No, that's correct.
So the initial 3-year commitment was a trial or an experiment to bring it to this point?
Yes.
Correct. Correct.
Is it more social? Like, I'm just trying to understand the city's involvement in the social fabric, whether we're responsible for funding social programs, and does this fit in that the social world rather than the municipal? You know, we're looking at bylaws, land use, and zoning, and those type of questions. Now we're getting into social welfare and food sustainability and all these things that are related to living, and I don't know if that's our mandate.
Right. Go ahead, Ms. McCabe.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, Ms. Brunn, go ahead.
So, Your Worship, I think, you know, I can only speak to the history for this project. And given that in 2014, when the first food security strategy was developed, it had, I believe, strong support from Council of the day, and has absolutely shown its worth in terms of additional funding and benefits that it's generating for, especially the more vulnerable members of the community. The food security role also oversees the food bank services at the Community Connections. And if you recall, when I brought forward the request for EOF funds to help build the incubator kitchen, there was 2 sides to that. There was, on one hand, working with local food producers and ensuring that fresh food was available to the food bank, but also supporting local food producers if they were interested in packaging and distributing their products through the incubator kitchen. They could use that as a bit of a business incubator. So there's a couple different approaches. Yes, it is a social program. Yes, it is also helps support entrepreneurs. But again, the strategy has been you know, something that's been approved by council in the past, and when we chose to update the strategy, it was with strong endorsement from this council. I can't remember if it was unanimous or not, but I don't know if that answers your question or not. But definitely, I think what we've seen, as Councillor Chalet pointed out, and I put a link in the report to the presentation we did on social recovery issues, food security is a really strong need in the community, and that was captured in our survey, our community wellness survey with the community, as well as by anecdotal and information, validated information through our social sector partners.
So can you ask one more question? So the food security that you're talking about is people who were desperate for food, not growing it in your neighborhood. No,
the food security strategy speaks to both. It speaks to making sure that people receiving services to the food bank, for instance, have access to fresh produce that's locally produced of a high quality. It also speaks to the fact that given, you know, challenges you know, to our infrastructure, climate change, that it is a good idea to have a resilient strategy in place to support growing local food in the region.
Great, thank you for that. And then, so Councillor Charlotte, I see you waving your arm off here, wanting to weigh in because of LFI. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, just to speak to that policy piece of it a little bit more, because I think there's a few different sides to the issue. We've talked lots before about it being complex between individual food security, that dire need of needing food, and then the food systems, which is the producers in our communities that we're not reliant on food coming from far away only. I think the need's been shown for that, especially with climate change, washing out roads, and all of a sudden the only place we can get tomatoes is too far away. The policy work is where I see the city's portion of that funding going towards, is having someone on staff that can help potential food producers and citizens navigate that policy landscape, but also for us designing our policy as a community, having someone on staff that's looking at it from that food security and food systems lens helps us design policy and work through our OCP in a way that makes it easier to do business with us. Where so much of the red tape that I remember from before being on council, like when I first came to town, was that there were pieces of policy or bylaw that would just get in the way of being able to grow food, where now we're able to simplify a lot of that language and remove a lot of those barriers to make it easier for people to navigate. Now, we're still running into some questions around that. For example, the greenhouses on the front lawn. I think there's still room to discuss where do we go from here, but that's why that food security strategy is being updated. We've accomplished a lot of the goals set out in 2014. So what are the next goals that we're going to strive towards? And are those worthwhile, or is there any red flag or some issues that might come up from those, which I think will be coming forward for more discussion over the coming months.
One of the things that we've been sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. One of the things we've been talking about is, years back, was getting a climate or environmental coordinator, a big picture person that would look at all the issues that are relevant, and food is one of them. Composting, waste, plastic bags, all those things that we've been touching on. But we're now just supporting food, and are not employees of us. We were just granting it to a contract agency, right? They're not taking directions from us on this food security front, or they're not feeding us. They're just giving us independent. They're an independent agency from the city, so we're just anyway. I guess the gist is we still need an environmental coordinator, and that should be part of their mandate to bring us proposals, and we pay for the position, and they would advise. Now we're supporting an outside agency. That's my confusion on the matter. I think they're outside of our scope.
Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. Through to Councillor Charlotte. Did you say that the food security strategy is being updated in the coming months? Right. Okay. Good. I look forward to hearing that. I'm fine in general with this, with one little exception, just because it's part of the bigger package and sort of understanding. I certainly would like to see, possibly in September, October, right at the end of our term, a bigger presentation by the community development coordinator as to how the food strategy and the all these different things come together. So there's that big picture, because that'll be an understanding for the new council coming in. Having said that, the one concern that I have with the motion as it is, it's an ongoing commitment, and it's solid, and I'm not really comfortable. So Mayor Sulz, I'm going to put a motion to amend it. So the motion as it is, subject to annual budget deliberations. If there's a second for that motion.
So who moved this motion, or did we put this motion on the table at all to start with? Just to remind me.
Yeah.
So do you want to amend the original motion? I'm going to go to the mover and the seconder.
So,
Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, I think it's best just to go with the motion, because it's a separate kind of concept. So I think,
all right.
So procedurally, I think we should just, there's an amending motion on the table. It's been seconded. So.
Okay, who seconded that motion?
Amending to an annual stage. And then, well, I think my take is I don't think we need a bigger.
The question, Councillor, who seconded the amendment?
Councillor Elliott.
Okay, all right. Now, Councillor Elliott, do you want to talk to that amendment?
Yeah, I just think we're looking. I've been looking. I think we've all been looking for something bigger, and the food element is important on the environment, but we're just dealing with that now, and I still think we need to address the whole show.
All right, Councillor Charlotte, comment.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't disagree with you, Councillor Elliott. I agree. I think we should have more strategies like the food security strategy. I think the format of it is very clear. It sets out what is the current problem, where is our end goal that we would like to get to, and how are we going to get there? Recognizing that it is incremental change over a long period of time, because you're not going to solve this quickly. With that said, I would like to see this longer than a review every year. I think that will add to some insecurity to the job, and I would rather see it on a longer window. It was initially approved for 3 years. I would rather see it at least a 3-year cycle, if not a 5-year.
So, Mayor Sulz.
Yes, go ahead. Sorry, Councillor Palmer.
Yeah, so just in response to that, I just think this is the appropriate way. And it's not that we've already done it 3 years. We're doing it again in this year's budget, so that rhythm is already happening. So if I was to use kind of a bizarre example, so we fix roads every year, but it's subject to budget deliberations each year. So this is already kind of entrenched in the system because it's been going year after year. So I just, having an absolute guarantee, I think, is fettering future councils and where they are going. So I would say the same thing, but regardless of whatever sort of ongoing operational things. So that's, I just think it's it's not targeted on the food security coordinator. It's more on process.
All right. Any other comments, Councillor Brooks-Hill?
I'll defer to Mr. Thackeray.
Oh, Mr. Thackeray, go ahead. Sorry.
I think what I might be hearing is, I think Councillor Charlotte and Councillor Palmer, if I'm not mistaken, you're both coming at this from two different sides, because the financial plan bylaw is a 5-year bylaw, and that could be amended at any time. And so I think you're both correct that those numbers can be put in, but they're always subject to council revision and a new council will be coming in. So it is the council's discretion to put those in the 5-year financial plan, and that will be reviewed annually as part of our budgeting process. We're required to do that.
Right.
Because we're required to establish goals and objectives through legislation. So I think Councillor Palmer, you're both right. And I think if you put it in the 5-year financial plan bylaw, that will address, I believe, what you're saying.
Okay.
From what I'm hearing.
Yeah, so through the chair, I'm being picky on the crossing of the T.
Okay. All right.
All right. Any other comments on the amended motion on the table? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Note that we have Councillor Charlotte and Councillor Brooks-Hill and Mayor Sulz opposed, and we have who's in favor? Councillor Palmer, Councillor Elliott, and Councillor Rind. I couldn't see your hand up either way. Are you in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
And so we have a tie, so that means that motion is defeated. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so going back to the original motion, all those in favor and opposed? We've got Councillor Elliott, Councillor Palmer, and Councillor Rind. Are you opposed?
No, I'm in favor.
You're in favor? Okay, so the original motion passes. Councillor Palmer, Councillor Elliott are opposed. All right, we're going to move on. Thanks for your time and for the conversation.
Just for clarity, Gary?
Yep.
So just, I'm understanding this, so we're committing to a $10,000 for the next number of years without any review?
That's correct.
That's correct.
It's always reviewed.
It's always reviewed.
It's always reviewed, but Ms. Braun, do you want to weigh in? Ms. Braun, would you like to weigh in, please?
I would just like to add that the food security function is actually in the work plan and the economic development strategy for the Community Economic Development Department. So this is an ongoing activity. So it, for instance, could also be dealt with as an expenditure within our spending limit on a regular basis if we saw value in that to help meet the targets of our ECDEV strategy and our work plan. So just to put it in some perspective, I'm not sure that helps or not, but I think presenting that vote of confidence or that support for this actually just raises tension again around this issue, and it'll feed into the next report that I'm bringing to you about a larger project.
All right, thank you for that. Now, Councillor Elliott, you have other further comment?
No.
All right. Councillor Charlotte, you had your hand up for the comment? Nope. All right, let's move on to item B, poverty reduction grant. Someone want to make that motion, please?
So I'll put the motion on the table that a grant application for UBCM's 2022 Poverty Reduction Planning and Action Program to support food bank procurement and food security programming be supported.
Is there a seconder for that motion, Councillor Charlotte? Discussion on the motion or comments, Ms. Braun? Questions, Council?
Yeah, I'll speak to the motion. And it ties to the previous one, because I think certainly how I voted could possibly be misconstrued. And there's this theme of ongoing accountability. And this here is for a grant application. We're not binding council on the accountability. So I'm supportive of the food strategy, and I'm supportive of this. And I'm always be looking for the accountability, because that's one of our major roles, and that's so I just wanted that clarification. Thank you, Mayor Sulz. Let's get into it.
All right, thank you. Any other, Councillor Elliott?
No. No, nothing, Gary.
Okay, sorry. All right, back to the question then. If there's no other comments, all those in favor? Okay, motion's carried. Thank you. Moving on to item C, financial closure amendment. Someone want to make that motion, please?
I'll bring this forward. The policy P12 financial.
Okay, thank you.
Of municipal employees be amended to reflect the current designated municipal employees.
Seconded by Councillor Palmer.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm having difficulties again with this bloody internet. So Councillor Palmer, did you have a comment, or you second that motion?
Second motion, call the question.
All right, all those in favor? Motion's carried, thank you. All right, let's move on to item D, sanitary sewer system condition. Councillor, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll put the motion on the table that McElhaney CCTV condition assessment report dated November 2nd, 2021 be received for information only. And I would like to speak to the motion. Seconded by Councillor Shirley.
So seconded for the motion, Councillor Shirley. All right, go ahead, speak to the motion.
Our corporate officer I was in discussion with her earlier this week, and some procedural things on receiving information. And so we've had this practice of receiving information, and it's actually in breach of our procedure bylaws, a technicality. It's in Robert's Rules of Order. And it's because of the potential confusion of what that actually means. And that's why I put for information only. And I did that same thing earlier on. But I think probably the corporate officer will be speaking with staff, and we might talk to council later on procedural stuff. Thank you, Mayor Sulz.
All right, thank you. Okay, so where are we at here? We're bringing this CCTV condition assessment forward. Is that correct?
Yeah, seconded.
Okay. All right. Any discussion on that?
Could we have the Director of Engineer just briefly give us a highlight of what this is all about?
Absolutely. And if council's all right, I do have a short PowerPoint just summarizing some of the high points of this report. There's a lot of information, obviously, typical for people in my profession: pictures, graphs, charts. So I'll try and distill it into a few slides that we can talk about, and you can receive for information. I'm going to share my screen. And I'm assuming you can see that?
Yep.
Yes.
Very good. So last summer, we hired a firm to come out to Revelstoke and run a camera down about 10 kilometers of pipe in our city. These are aligned with council priorities to manage our assets and implementation to ensure responsible stewardship of our assets. We have about 57 kilometers of pipe in the ground for the sanitary sewer, almost 800 manholes. 60% of our system is over 40 years of age, which also indicates that the pipe that goes in the ground is generally has a life cycle of about 80 years before it must be replaced. So you can see we're on the downside of the age of our pipe, which typically means we're starting to suffer aches and pains, and we need to start thinking about going to the doctor and getting some of these things fixed. So we did do the CCTV project last summer. 10 kilometers of pipe were inspected, about 18% of the system. It was centered on the city center area, mainly because it's the oldest pieces of pipe in the city. These pipes were installed in between 1906 and 1966. Inspection data and video was reviewed by a consultant, and a 10-year budget was developed based upon the findings of that data. This picture here represents the study area. All of the red lines and the dots associated are the manholes and sewer pipe that were reviewed with CCTV. What we found is that almost 40% of that 10 kilometers of pipes and manholes require rehabilitation or replacement. What were some of the defects we saw? Cracked pipe, bad construction, blockages, voids, deposits of gravel and fog, fat, oil, grease, root balls, broken joints, collapses. In the manholes, we saw undermining of the floor of the manholes. That's also relates to the failed benching, and then broken frames on the top. So if you wander around downtown and see our sewer manholes, many of them have got alligator cracking around the manhole lids, which indicates that we're probably getting a lot of water going into our sanitary system, and that's not a good thing. So here's some examples. You can obviously see the rocks and the fill were pushed up against the pipe, and it's got a void. So what is supposed to stay in the sewer is not necessarily staying in the sewer. And it also means that if there's groundwater above the elevation of the pipe, that groundwater is going into our sanitary sewer, which then means we are treating it in the wastewater treatment plant. Here's a partial collapse you can see. Here's where joints have separated. You can see rock and sand where the two pipes are supposed to be tied together and tight, not allowing any other water to come into the pipe or the sewage to leave the pipes. Here's the bottom of a manhole. You can see this is supposed to have a nice smooth concrete finish so that the sewage flows from one side of the manhole to the other. You can see here that it's likely that whatever is in the pipe is actually not getting all the way through the manhole and potentially infiltrating into the ground. Here's a piece of pipe where the bottom is completely gone. It's just gravel on the bottom. Root balls sometimes grow in because when it gets hot and the trees are thirsty, they find a place to find water, and here you go. It's validation of some of these issues that we see with the rainfall event in November that caused so much damage in the lower mainland. We also saw a huge amount of water enter the wastewater treatment plant during that same period of time. So the blue line represents our average flows into the wastewater treatment by day. And you can see over that 4-day period of 14th to the 17th of November, the red line is that period of heavy rainfall. So you can see that it corresponded to a huge increase in inflow to the wastewater treatment plant. So what that means is we're treating rainwater in the wastewater treatment plant, and we should not be doing that. It costs us money. So the next step in this process was to look at all the risk associated with broken pipe, bad manholes, and base the risk upon how many homes would be impacted by that section of pipe. As an example, if we had a piece of pipe near one of our lift stations, we tend to collect a lot of sewage right before you get to the lift station so we can pump it to the wastewater treatment plant. So if there was 100 homes impacted by that broken pipe versus 5 homes on that similar size pipe, the risk becomes much greater to staff and to the community should that pipe that services more homes fail completely. And so I hope that's clear. And then based upon this methodology, about 700 meters of pipe needs immediate attention in the city. At 17 locations, we have blockages that need to be addressed. And out of the 169 manholes inspected, 71 are in critical or poor condition. This is a graphic showing where the risk assessment indicated we should be focusing our efforts in mitigating damaged pipe and manholes. Red is bad. And so the red dots are manholes, the red line segments are pieces of pipe. And so these are areas that we need to address soonest. And in the lower right corner of that figure is the pipe that goes to our Downey lift station. And you can see it services quite a bit of town from basically Townley to Southside Market and from Oscar Street to the lumberyard. So the discussion part of it. So we need to spend some money. The high risk pipe, the 680 meters is about $1.5 million that should be expended. The blockage is about $85,000, and to fix manholes, about 1.7. Over the next 10 years, the consultants have estimated that we should be spending on average about $1.4 million a year for repair, replacement, or rehabilitation. And the cost varies significantly depending on the type of remediation or repair or replacement. And so the next step would be, should we get some funding that we could continue on with this program and figure out the best way and most expedient way to mitigate some of these issues. So conclusions, we did about 15% of our roads this year, or sorry, roads, sewer this year. About 30% of them are really old. And we're guessing over the next 10 years, we need about $14 million or $1.4 million a year just in the sewer. Recommendation for today is that council support the budget recommendations and the staff continue assessment and funding to repair, replace, rehabilitate the sanitary sewer system, and as well the necessary utility rate increases to fund the recommended spending levels. That concludes my presentation. Any questions? I'd be glad to try and answer your questions.
Great. So I'm still here, even though you only see my picture. I'm just trying to get stable internet. So Mr. Black, when we talk about blockages, are we talking about total blockage, part blockage? You know, how imperative is that to fix immediately?
Partial blockages, we do address full blockages as we become notified. That's usually when there's a backup into a business or a residence. Then we go in and snake out the main or the service from property line to the service or the sanitary pipe in the road. We have regularly, we see blockages, not necessarily due to the crushed pipe or broken pipe, but it does happen.
All right. Any other comments from council for Mr. Black? Councilor Brookshill.
Thank you for the presentation, Mr. Black. I'm just curious, if we're talking about replacing whatever it was, roughly 700 meters of sewer line kind of immediately, are we going to be looking when we rip up the road? I assume in most places the sewer line's close to the water line as well. Is that the case? Are we going to be trying to coordinate this so maybe we're repairing a road at the same time? If we're going to dig up part of it, maybe it's time to fix the whole road. Maybe it's time to replace the water pipe at the same time.
Yes, that will certainly be an aspect. And so, my apologies through your worship to Councillor Brookshill. Yes, absolutely. Those are considerations that we do look at. Unfortunately, and as most people are aware, it's the best we try. We pave a new road, and typically within a month or two, we have to go cut it open and fix something. But we will do our very best not to make that happen. And yes, we have the same concerns with the water system. And so if we can coordinate removal and replacement of all of our deep utilities at the same time, we can do that, in addition to repairing of the road surface. And so when the road's really bad, it's probably pretty likely that our pipes underneath are pretty old too. So there is a minor correlation there, not necessarily 100%, but that's a good place to start. Yeah, I hope that answered your question.
All right, Councillor Elliott.
Yeah, yes, Your Worship. Stephen, do you know how much we have in reserve for in the reserve fund for sewer maintenance or the system maintenance?
I'm not. Director McCabe can certainly provide that number. Offhand, I do not have that number in the back of mind.
Ms. McCabe, do you have any of that?
Through your worship, I don't have the final numbers yet for the end of 2021, but we are expecting it's definitely less than $1 million. In fact, it's probably more around under $900,000.
And the fees and charges, we're moving to separate them from the taxes. I think that's what we're trying to put in place. An extra fee. Those utility charges have a maintenance factor built into it. Is that the idea? So we're separating them from the tax bill and putting them into a designated fund. That money will go into reserve if it's surplus.
And to fund the necessary expenditures for O&M, staffing, materials, the wastewater treatment plant loan that we're going to be coming for a borrowing bylaw with. And so all aspects of operating the utility would be covered under the utility fee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Your Worship,
McCabe.
I just want to clarify, just because we collect the residential water and sewer fees on the property tax notice doesn't mean it's part of your property taxes. Those fees are already dedicated to those utilities. They're not intermingled with property taxes at all.
No, I understand that. I was just trying to make sure that the public understands it, that we're not getting a tax bill. You're getting, it's distinct.
Councillor Charlotte.
Thank you, Your Worship. And this kind of ties into that the utility conversation, I suppose, from last week. But I'm just curious as to historically, what have we spent on sewer rehabilitation? Where would that fit in that utilities budget? Or have we been?
Director McCabe, I would fall back to you to do the historical expenditures that we've been spending.
Unfortunately, not very much. I can tell you that much. I don't have the exact numbers on hand, but it definitely hasn't been a significant amount in past years.
If I might, to Councillor Charlotte, if it's any indication that if there was any correlation between where we were with our road rehabilitation funding based upon that, what was being funded prior to our arrival here in Revelstoke to where we are today, it was roughly 5 times what we needed more than what we were spending in order to have a okay or good road network. And so That's not a true correlation. It's just a rule of, if that's the case, this is where we were. It's likely where we are with this utility also. We can certainly come back to you with actuals for the last 5 years or so, in light of this coming forward to council for budget considerations next week. And then we can provide that information to you at that time.
Yeah, thank you. And through your worship, the only reason I ask is looking at the budget lines, because we do have the 5-year, the last historical that Ms. McCabe had presented with us. And I don't see any lines in there that look like any significant investment has happened for a while. So thank you very much for bringing such clear picture of our current state. It does look like we have some heavy conversations ahead.
You're there. I just pretend he's there.
I'm cutting in and out, or I'm not hearing you. It sounds like you guys were cutting out, but I guess it's probably just me. So any further comments, Councillor Palmer?
Thank you, Mayor Sulz. So just for clarity to the Director of Finance, these numbers that are in this report are in the information being provided by your department. They're already there.
They are.
Yeah, so, and it's good to have this discussion. It would have been nice to have it a long time ago. It'll be good to have it again early for the next budget cycle. Couple questions on the budget since we're here. So on the inspection on this program, so did we just spend $150,000 in 2021?
I believe the number was under 150,000 just for the CCTV project itself. There were some consulting, project management and report writing to review that data set, which would have brought the total project cost up to that 150,000. I believe the CCTV project itself was around 100 or slightly more.
Right. So that these numbers, so based what you have there, this is a 4-year program. This is the first year of a 4-year program of inspections.
Should council approve our budget, yes, that would be the case. It is, I think, becoming very clear to staff, and I hope through this presentation to council, that we need to get a better handle on what we don't see in the ground, and be sure that we are managing these utilities in the way they must be managed.
So, and then probably more for all staff, just again, the same theme that from before when we're looking at these numbers. So that if it's, and I'm looking at the global numbers, so it was 150 this year, 150 last year, 150 this year, and so on. So is so either the cost of inspection is going down, or inflation really isn't going to happen. So just a comment on the long-term budgeting thing. So trying to get them to reflect as close as possible.
If I may, Councillor, yeah. I'm sorry to interrupt, if I may.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the consultants did come up with a 5-year spend and then an estimate for the next 5 years. In that, I simply totaled the numbers that they put down on an annual basis to come up with the 14 million and divided by 10. So we will do what we can within a budget that we try and keep consistent, so that we don't see peaks and or big peaks of expenditures in 1 year, knowing that we have limited staff and limited contractors in the community. So that if we can contribute that amount of money to our local contractors, it's very likely they will be ready for us on a regular basis for the next 10 years, knowing that there's a good amount of money to be made in helping us out.
So, and yeah, that's good, and I understand it. And from the engineering, that's why I'm talking more to Tanya on the I think you're kind of getting what it's that theme that's there. It's just the consistency of the numbers. It's going to be a challenge though on the whole budget thing. So like we haven't talked percentages yet in any real way, and that's the big concern on all these little numbers. In this case, big numbers. are adding up. And so there's going to be some really tough decisions. There's been lots of tax increases and increases on utility fees. But meanwhile, our infrastructure deficit has been growing as well. So that's kind of the point of the motion that's, I'm not sure if we voted on it or not, but the motion on of receiving this for information. So it shouldn't be construed as budget approval. I like the water and sewer stuff, and I could sort of go on and on about it, the pictures and stuff. I'll try not to. I think I'm making Councillor Brooksfield go antsy. You've done this 10 kilometers of 57, and you had the 40% of pipes, that require some rehabilitation. I noticed that a lot of that was clay pipe. So this is the older part of town. I'm guessing this is, we hope, the worst part of town when that's going ahead. And just to go around that, I know our crews also have a camera that they use periodically for doing, and they were doing some work in Columbia Park. I peeked in the van there, and I think that it was a PVC pipe that looked in very, very good shape that could last another, it's 40 years old and could last another 100 if it was installed properly. So I think that, the engineers and the consultants sort of have the doomsday scenario for infrastructure deficit, and it's not necessarily the end of the world coming on these kind of things. I think that's all my comments for now, Mayor Sulz.
All right, thank you, Councillor. Any other comments from council? Seeing none, I'll call a question. We are receiving this report for information. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Let's move on to item E. Someone want to put that on the table, please?
Motion for a short 5-minute recess.
Oh, that's
all right. Somebody want to second that motion?
Don't need a motion. It's just a point of it. It's
okay.
It's
all right. Yep, we're gonna make, and while you're doing that, I'm gonna try and get better internet. Thanks.
Yeah. Someone said that we were supposed to start motion for recesses.
Only for if it's just a short recess. We're not recessing.
It was me that asked for the motion to recess, so that way the community we could hit mute and it wouldn't be like the meeting was still ongoing and it wasn't transparent.
Okay.
There's
okay. Okay. I remember the sorry about that.
So it's being recorded right now, so you can hit mute if you'd like.
Right. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, do we want to get going again? Need to
There
all right, so everybody's back. We want to move on to item E. Someone want to make that motion, please? Councillor Brookshill.
That WSP Canada Inc. be awarded the City of Revelstoke Leadership Asset Management Plan Levels of Service contract in the amount of $50,080 plus GST, and that the mayor and CAO be authorized to sign on behalf of the city.
All right, thank you for that. Seconder for the motion, Councillor Charlotte. Any discussion on that motion? Councillor Charlotte.
Thank you, Your Worship. Looking at this, I'm very excited to see the milestones framed out in this report on what does, and digging into it a bit more too, about the level of detail that goes into a levels of service framework and discussion. My comments on this is because this is a very important tool that I think all of council has been asking for as a tool to communicate with the community. This is what your taxes pay for. This is what we agreed to do together, and this is how we define that level of service. And what I would ask is that in the framework B, tools for effective decision-making for cities, council, and staff to use while considering that I'm curious if staff might already be considering this, or if there can be some consideration for how well this can integrate with the existing digital tools we have at the city, to be able to integrate any communications with those existing tools as much as possible. So for example, like Talk Revelstoke for having that levels of service conversation and using those tools for interaction and explanation, so that the community can get used to hearing from us in a consistent way.
Okay, thank you for that comment. Any comment, Mr. Black?
Through your worship to Councillor Schlett, my senior engineer Gary Sear is on the Zoom call today, so he can certainly bring forward those ideas to our consultant. And if it's council's pleasure, please ask Mr. Sear to chime in as need be through this presentation or through our discussion here.
Mr. Sear, any comment on what Ms. Charlotte said?
To the mayor, to Councillor Charlotte, we are planning to have some public consultation as part of the level of service program. So we can definitely use the tools that we have in place to consult the public for those.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Charlotte?
Your worship, I'm just, is there a way to track the usage of our Talk Revelstoke Bang the Table? I know it's forwarded. How active is it? And that's what I want to know. Or is it just a very elite, or a very knowledgeable few who know technology that use it? And I'm saying, are we missing the real connection with our community? There's a lot of people that don't go to these technical aspects, and we just said broadcast that we're lots of opportunity to reach out, but really, is there a connection? I'm just wondering how valid that those mechanisms are in connecting with our community. I'm just wondering, Facebook has a count or hit list, but really, if you get hits and it's the same people hitting it that are very tech savvy, does that reflect the community? And that's what I worry about.
So, Councillor Charlotte, Councillor Brookshill, do either of you have hands up? I'm seeing shadows, and for some reason, you guys keep moving around the room here on me. So, anyway, Councillor Brookshill, you're waving your arm.
While we're on the subject, we're gonna get into the weeds here.
Sorry.
Someone was recently complaining to me about Talk Revelstoke. Not that basically, they were complaining that the city newsletter they felt was better than Talk Revelstoke, in that the newsletter would tell them what was going on, whereas Talk Revelstoke, there's no way to see what's new. You have to actually go in to each item to see what's new.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, it just takes so much time, I've just given up, I don't bother trying anymore. Whereas when I got a newsletter in my inbox, then I could see what was new and then I could click on links and find more information. Whereas now, well, I have to spend 10 or 15 minutes every week or two to figure out what's new.
Councillor Charlotte.
Thank you, Worship. And this is why I keep bringing it up when we do different engagements with the community. The more we use the same tool, the more we can empower our community to engage with us in that way so that it's not on Facebook, it's not in informal conversation pieces. Any digital tool is going to take time to learn and onboard and get to know. There's always going to be some early adopters that will learn to use it first. The goal is then to use those early adopters and champions in each project to take that out to the community and onboard more people to learn where do you go to communicate, how does it used, and if we use it more consistently in more projects, hopefully we have enough investment within our city to be able to keep it more up to date. Because I think there's ways of using that tool a lot more than we currently are to bridge the gap to in-person engagement and other offline conversations, but bringing it back into one place that you can go to use as a resource. Because in my mind, levels of service is a living document. That's going to be an ongoing, constant conversation that we should be able to have every year during the budget. If the tool is set up in an efficient way that we can come back to year after year, then this would hopefully be a resource we can use for these conversations in the future, not just this time.
Perfect. Thanks for bringing it back to level of service. So we're going to get back on to the motion on the table. Any comments further to that on the motion on the table? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to item F, Stoke Living Road naming application. So, Mr. Simon, do you want to make comments on that before I ask for the motion on the table? Or are you okay for me going straight into it?
To your worship, you can go right into it.
All right. So, Councillor Brooks-Hill.
That the names Basin Lane and Keystone Crescent be authorized for the construction of a new roadway required as part of Stoke Living as in the package.
All right. Thank you. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Ryan, do you have your hand up back there?
Nope.
Okay. Thanks. I can't see that far back. Councillor Elliott, you're seconding that motion? All right. Thank you. Any discussion on the motion or questions for Mr. Simon regarding the naming of the roads in this Stoke Living subdivision? So no further questions. I will call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. All right, moving on to Parks and Rec, Luna Legacy Project. So someone want to put this motion on the table for me? I know that Ms. Donato was going to be here and she's been called away at the last minute. So Councillor Charlotte.
I can put the motion on the table and speak to any questions likely. The letter of support for the Luna Legacy project confirming that the monument will be installed on city property and that it will be placed in a location accessible to the community for at least the next 10 years be provided, and that the city's in-kind contribution for the project will have a total value of at least $2,000, which will include staff oversight of the installation and ongoing maintenance for the sculpture.
Okay, is there a seconder for that motion, please? Councillor Brooks-Hill. Discussion on that motion. Councillor Charlotte, you want to speak to it?
Yeah, just briefly, that the initial letter of support did go to Arts Council. However, it did not have the details required by the grant. So this is correcting that oversight.
All right, thank you. Any further comments from council? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Moving on to item H. Ms. Braun, you have a comment.
I just wanted to point out that today is International Women's Day, and it's fitting that this proposal came forward today. I think it was just a fluke, but good for us.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. Appreciate
pretty
that.
excited to do that.
All right, item H, Councillor Charlotte, you want to put that on?
Yes, at the Public Art Committee's recommendation to move forward with the lease of Up the Rabbit Hole by artist Sandra Barub for installation in the planter box in front of City Hall be endorsed.
Seconder for the motion. Councillor Burksell, any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Moving on to correspondence. Someone want to put this motion on the table for me, please? Councillor Burksell.
I'm unclear what the motion's actually saying. So
it's just
because they're asking for a letter of support, but also asking for how much they'll be charged for the rental as well. So I'm just wondering if maybe we should talk about it before we make a motion.
All right. So, Ms. Floyd, any comment regarding this? I know I asked for it to be put on. I got the letter sent directly to me by Mr. Doris asking for support. I'm asking for clarification. Ms. Floyd, can you weigh in a little bit on that?
Sure, Your Worship. So we took the letter as being twofold, and we'd like to offer the letter of support. However, we think that the request for financial support or decreased fees is probably something that is better addressed during the grant and aid process. And so both, I believe, Director Donato and possibly McCabe have been in touch and advised what the process is.
So we're just looking at letter of support at this point, not dealing with the financial or dealing with what they're wanting as far as ice time goes. It's just letter of support for the Cyclone Cup. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
All right. Does that clarify things for you, Councillor Burksell?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to put that forward so then that a letter be provided in support of the 2023 Cyclone Taylor Cup.
Seconder for that motion, Councillor Charlotte. Any further discussion on the motion? Councillor Charlotte.
I'm curious about the current status of the plan for the arena roof, how that will impact the timing on this. Just to check in and see where that fits.
Good question. Any comment, Ms. McCabe? You've lit up the screen with your presence there, so we'll let you weigh in. You're muted.
Actually, I see Mr. Black is here, so he might be able to answer that better than me.
We're passing the buck.
Through your worship to Councillor Charlotte, we are currently finalizing the last bits and pieces of our prolonged evaluation of the many aspects of the arena roof issue, and we expect to have a report coming to you in the next month or so, summarizing the findings and asking for council to provide direction to staff at that time.
Okay.
All right. Any Councillor Palmer?
Thank you. Staying off topic a little bit longer on that, the arena roof has been a long-term thing for a couple of decades. I look forward to getting that issue out of the way, but that'll be for another time. On the Cyclone Taylor Cup, I'm actually very excited about this application, and I think it's a great thing for the city. It's interesting that a ski town, a ski bum town, really is a hockey town, and our foreigners from the southern half of the globe love it and are the biggest fans. And so when we start talking about the funding side of this, what's great about this is it's off season, April off season. So that's filling hotel beds and more excitement, people coming to town when it's a little bit in the shoulder season. And so that's great for the businesses. It's great for tourism. And I think there's a question there should there be tourism dollars that are going into these kind of events? And is there opportunities for that, especially if they start talking about any kind of upgrades or that kind of thing? Furthermore, on the financial point, I think it's really, really important for the community to know that we already subsidize the Grizzlies very, very handsomely. Like our fees for the ice time, like we're pretty close to giving it away already. So there, possibly in that grant application, we might, consider saying, okay, well, what's the real cost of the ice? How much are we already subsidizing the Cyclone Taylor Cup? And that could almost be a separate motion in itself, but I think it's really important to recognize that we are subsidizing them financially and to a big extent. But I'm really excited about the event, and maybe I'll even come up and watch.
You got a ticket.
Hard to come with.
Yeah, okay.
Ms. Brown, you have comment?
Just to echo Councillor Palmer's comments, this is a wonderful economic driver for our community in shoulder season, and we will be discussing with tourism partners how we can support this event through marketing and through, perhaps use of RMI funds. But essentially, 500 people coming to town at that time of the year will have a big impact.
All right, thanks for the comment. Any other comments from council regarding the motion on the table? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you. Moving on to item B, 12B. Someone want to put that motion on the table for me, please? Councillor Charlotte.
That the letter from WildSite in support of urban trees be referred to staff and considered in association with budget and work plans.
Seconder for the motion. Councillor Palmer. Discussion on the motion. Councillor Brooks Hill and Councillor Charlotte.
I fully support this concept of more urban trees. I think another aspect that should be looking at is protecting the current trees, because the only thing better than planting a tree is not cutting it down. I'm wondering if we should also be referring this to the Environmental Advisory Committee.
Comment from anyone else?
I'm looking at Councillor Charlotte.
Okay, Councillor Charlotte, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that would be great. It was a clear question of what the Environmental Committee is being asked to advise on. I think we did discuss this at the last committee meeting briefly. There was general support, but the question, it'd just be what is the question for them? If we're going to put it into the work plan.
Are there type of trees that might be best suited for our town, or where did they suggest they could use them? Maybe?
Well, that seems more like a consultant question rather than a committee.
Well, they would probably be the most in tune group if they're, rather than hiring someone. So they certainly would have the information source. I mean, there's supposed to be an expert panel on the environment.
I'm volunteer though. Advisory.
Yeah, I'm going to interrupt here, and I'm going to say that probably our staff's going to know more about what urban trees are going to grow best in our community, as they're the ones that are purchasing them. So I think if we defer this to staff, they will understand what's going to be the best as far as trees, and we can get our best advice coming back through that. That's my suggestion. I'm not saying we can't go to the environmental group or committee, but definitely the staff are going to give you the best idea with that. Any comments from council regarding that?
Just in terms of, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just to wrap that up then, I think the motion probably encompasses it just fine, but this to me seems reminiscent of the dark skies policy, where we have a policy around dark skies that we are trying to protect the migratory bird populations. There's a rationale for it. There's a reasoning for it. It gives guidance to all development. And I think the urban trees conversation, and to Councillor Brooks Hill's point of protecting existing trees, I think some sort of a policy statement that would give clear guidance as to our priorities when it comes to an urban forest would probably be helpful, but I'm happy to leave that to staff's discretion.
All right, so in light of that, does someone want to put the motion that's here on the table as written? We already did that? Okay.
It's on the table.
All right.
So can I, so in general, we're in support of the letter. So we would encourage staff to seek or address these issues. Yeah, so that's the direction we're going here.
Yeah.
So in principle, we're in support of what Urban Wild Site suggests. And that's what I'd like to get from the council, the environmental council. Do you think this is a valid proposition? If it is, recommend it and we would approve it. That should be the normal process through.
So you're
So
right.
yeah, so I'm just going to go, if you know, when we go to our committees, they're going to make recommendations for us. It's up to those who are sitting around the table to make the decision. We're not asking our committees to make the decision for us, and we're just going to rubber stamp them. That's the whole idea of this thing. So yes, we're basically saying that we're asking our staff to look at this and see, and then they'll come back to us regarding our budget and work plans. So any further comment? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All those in support? Good, motion's carried. Thank you. Let's move on. Communications. So with communications, Finance Committee meeting minutes dated February 2nd. Anyone want to make comment on that? Seeing none, Planning Advisory Committee meeting minutes for February 15th. Any comment on that? Seeing none, Public Art Committee meeting minutes for February 16th. Seeing none, I am going to go. Ms. Floyd, do we have any questions from the press?
No questions from the press, Your Worship.
All right, I'm going to ask for a motion to go in camera pursuant to section 90.1 A, C, and K of the Community Charter. Someone want to make that motion for me? Councillor Charlotte, seconded by Councillor Rind. All those in favor? Motion's carried. We're going to go in camera. We're going to take a couple-minute break. I have to connect up to a new internet.